Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Archive 81. So, of course, this is episode 7, and I am just baffled and godsmacked by this episode, simply because, one, my biggest problem ever with the show is when you go on and have to give me a whole new set of people to now have to explain to you, the viewer. In one, an episode that is too short for me to care. Two, by the very tail end of the show, which, why would I need to know a whole different set of people for them to not really last? I'm baffled and or confused. That kind of feels like when they introduce a character by the end of season 1, and they say, oh yeah, this guy's going to be really important in season 2. Believe me, like, we're going to use him a lot. And then all of a sudden, like, the character just vanishes. And you're just like, wow, what a waste that was. Because they're like, oh yeah, we couldn't get that character to come back for season 2. Because they're like, hey, I got my big fat check. I'm going to get out of here. So they just decided to quickly kill that person off, or they just decided to just not really use that character all that well. Kind of like we had it to where the end villain of season 1 of Titans was like quickly wiped out in the very first second season freaking episode. Where I'm just like, wow, like, man, they really built up that villain to be a huge menacing thing for him to just be wiped out so quickly and easily, for us to not really have like all that great of a second season for that show. But yeah, so this honestly to me is the worst episode out of this show. Hands down. Because when looking at it, what was the point of both Mark and Jill talking about all that from an episode before? What was also, because I'm consistently still getting annoyed with this, is, so what the is Melody? What was, I saw on IMDb, it was older Melody. Do we still have it where Melody is just Schrodinger's cat, where she's still like alive and dead and both at the same time? She Dennis Quaid from Frequency? Oh my god. This episode. Because we really have it where technically Melody never made it out. Never made it out, so to speak. I'm being vague here. So I don't know how Mark was able to talk and conversate and whatever. Who did the what now is probably what I would describe this episode. Of who did the what now? Because what the fuck? That would be my most kind of like statement about this. But not only that, so I have to know about all these people. Are you kidding me? This is the shortest episode. This is the shortest thing. What the fuck, show? What the fuck? Not even cursing in this one, because I don't want to show up in some report by YouTube and say, oh, he said the F word, heaven forbid. Heaven forbid people have rage. Yeah, what a waste of this show for this episode. Was it really just like Netflix needed money to blow for this one? Where it's like, hey, get like the most expensive one-off episode. And so you're going to have to get some 20s stuff. You're going to have to get some 1920s things. Really just don't like put a whole lot of money and all the other stuff, but man, do one episode where you're just blowing a lot of money. and we'll be fine about that. And I guess this just had to be that 1-1. Or instead of spending a lot of money on their probably very last episode, they're probably spending a lot of money on this episode just to get all these antique-like looking things for this 20s time period. Just to probably turn around and have the very last episode probably be this like lackluster thing of just like, well, I guess we have to figure out some way to just end this show. And we do have Dan in this episode, but like anything that he's really involved in, I'm like, I don't even care. I don't even care. And plus, also, here's the hilarious thing. So, at the end of this episode, we have a character who obviously didn't go through, or did go through a let's have the same actor thing as when this person was in past. And now I'm just like, wait a minute, so you hired Melody with a whole new actor, but this person you decided to go with the exact same person, but just age them out. Why? For the love of God, why? Oh, God. If I could act like I could cry not right now, I would. But I don't have the will to want to just act crying right now. But I would if I could, if I really wanted to. But I don't. So, with that said, I've wasted too much time talking about this episode. Because all of it is basically whatever Jill and Mark talked about in previous episode, we're redoing here. So, why would I recap any of that? Why would I recap this episode? Jill and Mark has already recapped it for me, so I feel it's a waste. Anything that I said between Mark and Jill, this one. I don't want to recap this. It's a waste. Plus, this is only 40 some odd minute episode. People will probably watch it regardless if they watch the rest of the show. Everybody. Man, this last episode better blow me away. And I better be freaking like blown so badly to where it's just like, man, like I had the shakes after this episode. That was some blowing. I was like, whoa, that blow. I was blown. God, I feel like, I'm sorry, I'm wasting too much time. Let's go into it. Let's go into that double five. I am not going to tee this one up because Mark and Jill has already done that for me. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this episode. So, yeah. This episode. So, Dan, of course, is to wake up and is to supposedly go to his bathroom, realizing that his teeth are weirdly molded. So all of a sudden, we have Dan, who is, of course, going on and seemingly barfing off mold. And immediately once we got to have Dan wake up here, and he went to the mirror and he saw these black teeth. I'm like, this is a dream sequence. And then surefire enough, Dan wakes up to, of course, seemingly cough away the fact that he was to have this dream where he almost barfed. He ralphed up some mold. So, we of course go on and have Dan that is to make his way to Davenport in this episode. Really, I just want to cover all the Dan stuff within this whole episode because I feel that's worth covering more than anything else that I'm going to have to cover after this. So, plus, none of this stuff that I cover in this episode, I would rather just covering the Dan stuff, so let's go into it. So, Dan is to, of course, go on to find Davenport at the LGM because he tries to call ahead and it seems that no one is answering. So, and I think that's probably purposely done. Probably they went on and just had it toward Dan is to not make a call to LGM or LMG. You know, that building place that it doesn't seem like we're really going to really need to give a about Legacy Management Global because they've already kind of told us that. So Dan goes off to meet with Davenport, and so we seriously have it to where Dan goes all the way to this building for him to just talk to a TV screen. Huh? So Dan goes all the way to this building to not talk to Davenport? Seems like a waste. So, we all of a sudden have it, unless there's a real story reason why Dan is not physically talking to a Davenport, then I would be okay with that. But until that time of which that we make sense of all that. Anyways, so we have Dan confronting Davenport via TV screen. To have Dan go on and mention, it's like, well, hey, like, you drugged me and you took me back to my place. And Davenport is like, well, I'm sorry, like, we had found you and it seemed like you had some mental health problems. And so we went on and we had a doctor kind of check on you and help you and so on and so forth. And so Dan's like, I'm sorry, like you didn't like you're lying to me as well as he normally is. And so we go on and we continue to have this back and forth, but we really have it to where we have Davenport that's really thanking Dan for him finishing up this project, but Davenport is really just telling Dan for him to just take this money and leave because I think Dan has gotten far too close to this project, and Davenport now is worried about how close Dan has been. So really, it's now that time for Davenport to kind of pull the ripcord on Dan to just be like, okay, your services are no longer required. So we go on and we have Dan who's walking away from this, who's like, fa, because there seems to still be a number of answers that he still wants. Like, how was his dad tied to this whole Visser burning thing? Why isn't Melody still technically alive? Why is also Melody possibly in two different worlds in this episode? Okay, sure, whatever. Anyways, so we go on and have it where now Dan is spotting Mark rummaging through Dan's stuff. And, you know what, if I were Dan, I would just buy a gun at this point. I would be worried that Dan is going to have to, like, really get in some real spy trouble stuff. Like, all of a sudden he's going to come home and find his whole place ransacked, and somebody's going to come in there and try to assassinate him, and he's going to have to pull some James Bond stuff to try to get out of that. I just have that distinct feeling that somebody's going to come in and just shoot him in the back of the head, and he's not going to be able to defend himself. So We go on and we have Mark, who of course is talking to Dan about that whole cryptic message or whatever that he was to, of course, give him. And so we go on and we have Dan, who is going and showing Mark the whole like T Bellows video, where Bellows is going on and talking about Patricia and all the stuff that he had to go on and do. So Mark is just like, okay, well, I think it's my time for show and tell. So Mark is going on and now showing Dan the whole Voss Syndicate freaking recordings and all this information that he is to get on the whole thing that is to at some point had been the Circle, where William Crest had gone on and done a thorough dipping of research upon the Circle. And so now we have to have it where it's, of course, projector time, where all of a sudden we are now back into the 20s, back in that mansion, and now back with a girl who, of course, is to be Iris Voss, who is to go on and hire a maid servant woman to assist her in what? I'm not quite sure. Getting drinks at some point? Maybe Rose is basically Iris Voss's Alfred? I'm not quite sure. So we go on and we have Iris, who is to mention that it seems that she is to be desperate to want a child within her belly for some odd reason. She wants a bun in the oven. She wants a child within inside of her. So we of course have it to where Iris is so desperate to want a child that she is to go on and is to go into any means necessary to get this child. And I'm like, wait a minute, so this technically is Ghostbusters 2. Let me get this straight. So, we technically don't have a girl with a child, but we have a girl that wants one. So, this girl is basically Dana Barrett in this story, who is Sigourney Weaver's character in Ghostbusters 2. And so, we then have Caligo, the demon monster ghost of a thing, that is to be ringing it up in a TV somewhere. So that basically is Vigo the Carpathian, and a monstrous being that is to be trapped into a painting to eventually, by the hate and the anger and violence, is going to eventually unleash said monstrous thing upon the world, which for, I guess, this show, I guess if you hum hard enough, the monster will appear. If you just hum it out hard enough, some old goofy singing thing that honestly just comes from some jewelry box somewhere. We just have it to where this monster is just like, okay, I'll just appear weirdly in some, like, goofy thing. Anyways, so it's basically the same thing. So we go on and we now have it where Iris is to, of course, talk to Rose and hire her for this job. So, but it seems that Rose doesn't exactly know what she's getting herself into. Because Rose is to be told, hey, like, would you like the whole new world in your, like, to be held into you? Like, of course, Jess is to have been given that catchphrase of, like, hey, would you like the whole world in your hands kind of thing? That's what they should have said. Would you like a whole new world in your hands? That whole old song or whatever. He's got the whole world in his hands. That would have made a lot of sense, but they didn't go that route. So we go on, and so we have at one point, let's fast track here. We have a girl who I guess to be a witch, that is to be Baldong, that is to go on and try to steal a book from the Voss family. And so we go on, we have Rose meet up with this woman, this Baldong, and what ends up happening is that they don't want to go and kill this woman because I guess they want to be able to use her. But it seems that they end up shooting her. And so we go on, we have Iris who's desperately saying, like, hey, bring her into a tub because we want to keep every single bit of this woman's blood. And so let's try and quickly get her into a tub so we can basically drain her whole body of blood so we can use this blood for this ceremony. So, fast track here, where we had this whole video that starts this episode with the Karam comet, where we go on and we say that this Karam comet is to, of course, be taken the name from the god of the fairies, or the ferrymen. I'm like, what is it with me? Like, it seems like I've gone on and found, like, stuff that has a lot to do with ferrymen. Like, because I went on and watched, like, Ghost Ship, and, like, that guy's last name is actually Ferryman. You would have thought his name would have been Karan Ferryman. Or Ferryman Karam, but I guess it wasn't. So, we of course have that video just talking about a comet and talking about Karamite and from this secondary comet, and that was much smaller, that was gone on and to have hit like 1,000 or thousands of years ago. So, or 1,000 years ago. So, and I don't know if I explained that or not. I don't think I have, so I think I'm good with that. So, alright, that's explained. So, we go on to this party to celebrate that Karam is coming. This comet is coming. So, these people are weird. So, they're celebrating a comet. Man, they must really love space for some odd reason. So, we go on and we have them celebrating this thing, and so we go on and we are to have Iris's brothers who are a little bit scared about what Iris is to do here, because we go on and we have one of these brothers that is going and telling Iris that I guess she will go on and sacrifice all of these people to this entity, to this god, to Caligo. So, now I can probably understand why this building was to have been burnt down, because I guess when you need to sacrifice, man, you need to really just sacrifice a load of people to this god Caligo to be able to benefit from Caligo, I guess. Even if it means sacrificing your own self, which I think is stupid. So, maybe Caligo goes and just kills all these people off. Maybe he just decides, like, you know what? I don't like stupid people, so I'm going to wipe all these cats out. I'm just going to start this fire and make it so that they won't leave this building. Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe that's it. So, we go on, we have, of course, Iris who starts off this ceremony, and in that secret room that nobody knows about. And we, of course, have the projector rolling as both Mark and Dan are watching over this videotape that we've technically already seen what goes on from Jill and Mark watching this tape. Hits review. Anyways, so because we have it where the only new, I guess, real information is, I guess, Iris was to go on and have them just make pictures, and they I guess realize that when they're to do this ceremony that they're like, wow, like we can see this ghost in the background, and wow, that looks pretty awesome. And so Iris is like, well, what if we actually had a moving picture? What if we had a camera and recorded this whole thing? Like, wouldn't that be like something? And they're like, yeah, like we should get on that. So we go on, we have this ceremony being attempted here because we had Iris who was just trying to pray to this god before, and having a lot of people just kind of humming it out. And while that was happening, this god was just kind of around there, and they were taking pictures of this. So now this time around, we have it to where this ceremony is to be put in place. And so Iris is going on and having everybody just surrounding her. And so we go on, we have Iris who is pouring the Baldung's blood over the statue. And everybody's starting to just really hum and really start to breathe heavy as this ghost is to appear, as they're kicking off this ceremony. So all of a sudden, we of course have Iris who is to go and find Rose and ask her if she's prepared to have this new world being put inside of her. And so all of a sudden, we have Iris who is to stab a knife into Rose and cut her neck, and is to, I guess, kill her off here. We are to naturally assume. So we also had the moment that Rose was going on and seeing the mold in parts of the house, and Rose went on and confronted Iris about it, but it seems like that talk had went nowhere. And we also had at some point where Rose was having the exact same dream that Dan was, about her going and coughing up this mold. And so it seems that this girl and Dan are exactly alike, telling us, I wonder where this story's going. Is Dan going to get sacrificed to the god again, and they're going to try this ceremony and it's probably not going to work? So we also find out that, I guess, Annabelle from before, the painting of the woman that she was to make a painting of was actually Iris from before. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And it also seems that when Iris, I guess, was to assume that she had prayed to this god and tried to have a child yet again, and the doctors had told her, it's like, hey, if you try to have a kid one more time, you're going to die. Because evidently this girl is to heavily bleed to the point of the doctors being sent down, and they're like, yeah, you shouldn't have children. How many times do we have to tell you this? So hence why we had Iris, who was pushing, of course, to get this ceremony and this sacrifice, and to be able to try to pull this whole ceremony off so this girl could just selfishly have a child. I guess they didn't have adoption in the 20s, so yeah, I guess you're just stuck with who you're stuck with. So after this whole footage is to be taken down or taken over, and we have it to where Iris's brother is telling Iris that she's going to sacrifice everybody. And so we have it where it seems that Iris's brother is just kind of out of this because he's like, no, I can't go on with this. So now we have it. We're reasonably now the whole old finished stuff is all to be done now. So really the only thing left to go and talk about here is that we have it, of course, where they're trying to piece together who is really left to talk to here. And so we, of course, have it toward Dan is to realize that Annabelle was to realize that Iris was in the painting. And so we go on, we have Mark who's telling Dan, it's like, well, maybe Annabelle is still alive. And she would probably be roughly about like 50 years old by now, so maybe we should go and find out where she actually is. So we have the two of them go to this one mental or just hospital or mental hospital to go and find Annabelle that is to be in one of these rooms. And so it seems that Annabelle is to know exactly who Dan is, and she probably naturally knew he was going to come at some point. So Dan, of course, is asking Annabelle about things, and we go on and we have Annabelle that's just really telling Dan that he needs to go on and rescue Melody because now Melody is the one inside the paintings, not Iris. And so Dan needs to figure out some way of being able to save Melody. And I'm thinking, like, well, I don't think that's going to be an easy task because Dan has no more tapes left. Dan, how is he going to be able to do this? Like, is it going to be like a butterfly effect thing where he's going to have to go through old tapes and figure out when he had those previous connections with Melody to try to message her a thing to try and stop all this? Is there going to be a way for Melody to stop all this in the past so all of a sudden Dan doesn't know about any of this in the future? Wouldn't that be an interesting thing to just try and pull off? Because then how would Dan be able to help Melody in the past if he knows nothing about it? That's kind of the whole problem with time travel, where it's like you would have like this askewed dimensional thing, or maybe you would just have to have Melody that is to talk to Dan in the future, explain all this, to have him then go on and figure out the one way to get to Melody in the past. I don't know, it just kind of seems absurd. But that's the way of which that this episode is to end. With them, of course, going on and having Annabelle kind of guiding Dan with what he needs to do in this very last episode, is to figure out a way to save Melody in the past. Because we go on, and I guess we are to know that in the last episode, we're probably to focus way too freaking much on some ceremony that is to basically be the exact same thing that we saw probably at the end of this episode we're seeing redone at the Visser. So we're probably going to have a whole entire episode that focuses on the Visser apartment and them doing this ceremony. And so I'm thinking, I'm like, well, so in the future, like, is Dan going to have his own ceremony being done after he tries and prevents Melody's ceremony? Are we going to have to go on and have Dan who gets his throat cut in this ceremony because he changed the past, so like he's going to have to do this ceremony in the future? I don't know. Because there's something about this that feels that one way or another we're gonna like perfect this ceremony, and that's bound to happen at this point. And eventually we're going to release this ghost, or we're going to kill this thing. Hopefully, whichever this gets resolved. Unless they're just going to go ahead and be like, hey man, we're going to do another season of this. So, I don't know. There's going to be a lot that they're going to have to, I guess, try and pull off in the last episode, and we'll see what happens here. But with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here so I can kind of get underneath the time of which that this episode was to be done. So let me know if there's something in the comments below which that you can tell me that I had forgotten, or maybe you just want to talk about this show anyways, or talk about how you like it, or talk about how you hate it, or whatever. Maybe some people may never have gotten won over by this show. I'm easily won over by it. So a lot of people could go on and just at the very last episode be like, "Yeah, I didn't like this show at all. This sucked." And that's okay, because probably they just want the clear consensus. Whatever I am to talk about with this. So I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.